Judgment. We've all been party to it. Perhaps an unhappy hater has criticized you for who you are, how you look, or something you've done. Or maybe a seemingly well-intentioned person has offered judgment disguised as advice. Or perhaps you have sat in judgment of someone else yourself. Now, when we are judged, it's hard to not be affected by that. It is an indictment of our person, and as a very conscientious person myself, I take very seriously my integrity and I try to live every day by my moral code and values, so when someone questions that, I find it rather difficult to not let it in. But the truth of the matter is that judgment says more about the person doing the judging than it does about the person being judged. Now, typically, it is someone who is pretty unhappy with some aspect of their own life who feels entitled to offer criticism, character assassination, or unsolicited advice. For instance, as the owner of a fitness studio, over the years I've had several new clients report back that their loved ones were immediately critical of them for starting a new regimen. They'd get comments like, well, why would you change your diet? You can't sustain that. Or, this is inconvenient for me. Now, what I've come to realize is that typically these types of naysayers are judging because they're uncomfortable with the fact that deep down, they truly want change for themselves. And then seeing someone else have the courage to take action calls attention to their own inaction. Hey, change is scary and denial is much easier. Now, I know there are many people out there who would love to reinvent themselves but are too afraid to try. Now, turning that reflection inward is so uncomfortable that lashing out at those who are actually making those strides affords them excuses for avoidance, and it's much easier. Now, I've mentioned before that I've suffered through a very painful divorce, and in the excruciating process of rebuilding myself through this loss and devastation, I've actually been judged by others for these difficult changes that I had to make for my own well-being. Now, some observers of this transformation of mine deemed me disgusting, unstable, crazy, vindictive. I've been called the B word, and among other labels that I neither earned nor deserved. Now, even though I know I am none of these things, being a person who lives from her heart, these words still feel like arrows shot at my back. Now, I learned through this process to enforce my boundaries and how I allow myself to be treated, and I will never give discounts on my worth. Yet knowing that, I still have to remind myself not to take these things in, because I know that these judges are likely projecting onto me some of their own subconscious perceived inadequacies, but still, it's difficult not to feel compelled to defend myself. Shout out to comedian Sarah Silverman, who totally freaking gets it. Earlier this year, she was the recipient of a very nasty judgment hurled her way online by a man who called her the C word. Now, instead of taking it personally and attacking back or becoming indignant or even standing up for herself, she turned to empathy. She offered kindness to this man. Now, after doing a little digging to see what made him so darn grumpy, she discovered it was this guy who was suffering from both physical and emotional pain. And my guess is he was attacking because he saw her as having it all where he only had pain. Now, she reached out to him with understanding, even sharing her own experience with back pain. And she completely turned the situation from one of viciousness to one of caring concern. Now, she's an amazing example of how to respond to judgment in this world. There was no need to defend her own honor. Her actions show who she is. And she was able to do this in the scrutiny of the public eye. So it just goes to show you that sometimes the most critical people are often those that are hurting the worst inside. Now, this is not to say that there aren't just meanies out there trying to stir up trouble. I'm sure it happens, but the people in your life that matter don't mind if you're not perfect. And the people who do mind, don't let them matter. So, if you find yourself being unfairly judged, I know it's hard, but don't feel compelled to deny or defend. You can just ignore it, or you can ask them what is really bothering them. Find out what chord was struck and maybe even address those insecurities. Likewise, if you catch yourself feeling judgmental about someone else, take a step back and ask yourself what's truly, deeply, really bothersome about this person's actions. You might just find out that your criticisms are actually about you. When we dig a little bit deeper for understanding of what's going on beneath the surface, we can avoid a lot of pain for ourselves and for others. My name's Denise. Thank you guys for listening. Live well, feel well, be well.